Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a check of the top headlines this hour. Iran says its armed forces are ready to respond immediately to any US strike. The warning comes as President Trump reiterates military threats and US forces deployed to the region. European Union foreign ministers are expected to list Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist group. The move follows a deadly crackdown on protests, the European Union's top diplomat says. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he raises the Jimmy Lai case and Uyghur rights with President Xi Jinping. He also said talks made progress on trade, travel and resetting of the UK-China relations. China executes 11 people linked to Myanmar-based scam gangs. As per state media reports, Beijing says the move targets key figures in cross-border cybercrime. According to the Kremlin, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara held talks in Moscow focusing on expanding trade, economic cooperation and the future of Russian military bases in Syria, while Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said both leaders have agreed there is broad potential to deepen cooperation. A plane crash in northeast Colombia killed all 15 on board, including a local lawmaker. The aircraft loses contact after departing Cucuta, a short flight to Oshana. According to the UNHCR, the Royal Humanitarian Foundation of Bahrain has signed a $2 million grant to rehabilitate about 470 damaged homes in Syria. This is part of a broader international support that included a $5.37 million Japanese-funded UNHCR program for support to Syria. According to an ECOWAS statement, the bloc has lifted all remaining sanctions on Guinea after the December election of former junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya, who won 86.7% votes and was sworn in earlier this month. Alright, we're on to now the top focus. The European Union has slapped new sanctions on Iran's Interior Minister Iskandar Momeni and Prosecutor General Mohammad Moawahedi Azad over their roles in the brutal crackdown on nationwide protests. The move targets senior officials accused of directing security forces that violently suppressed demonstrations, resulting in widespread deaths and human rights abuses. Matthew Wadham, who's an American journalist and author from Washington, D.C., joins me in this conversation. Matthew, firstly, do take us through the death toll that has taken place in this governmental crackdown, because there are of course different reports saying different figures. Different human rights groups are also coming up with the different figures from different parts of the world, whether US or Iran. What is an estimate that we should think of when we think of the number of people who've died in these government crackdowns in Iran?
I don't have an exact number, but it's in the thousands. It may be. I think it's above 10,000. It may be in the tens of thousands. I don't think the Iranian government is known for its honesty, and I think that outside observers probably have are probably offering a more honest perspective on the atrocities that the Islamic Republic has been committing against its own citizens in recent months. So, I would say probably in the tens of thousands. It's a brutal dictatorship in Tehran, and anybody who opposes it gets murdered.
All right, then what's your view of the European Union sanctions now?
Well, if the European Union is imposing sanctions, it means that they're serious. I think they're serious about wanting to get rid of the totalitarian theocratic regime in Tehran. So they're making their opposition known. For many years, the European Union has just sort of sat idly by and let events happen in Iran and maybe condemned it from time to time, but not actually done anything. Here, they're actually doing something that might have an impact, even though, I question the effectiveness of sanctions. I always have. But, you know, at least the EU is finally doing something.
All right. And what's your assessment of the designating of the IRGC as a terrorist organization? Of course, France has not agreed to that in the European Union as of now, but the bloc is primarily wanting to do that.
Primarily wanting to do what? You mean dismantle the
Designate the
Revolutionary Guard?
IRGC as a terrorist organization.
Oh, designating it as a terrorist organization. I couldn't quite make out what you were saying. Sorry. Well, I think that that's a fair organization. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is very similar to the SS terror troops that were present in Nazi Germany. So I think it's a perfectly valid designation, and I think that there will be a time when eventually, when the mullahs fall in Iran, when these people will be brought to justice, when they will be put on trial for crimes against humanity, and they really should be. You know, I think they're going to have eventually some kind of like a Nuremberg trial in Iran to judge these people. And that seems only fitting. The Revolutionary Guard, yeah, they are what you would consider to be terrorists. So this seems right to me.
Matthew, hold on, stay on with us as we now proceed. Viewers, now according to reports, Alexei Likashev, head of Russia's state nuclear cooperation, has stated that Russia is prepared to evacuate its staff from Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant if necessary. He added that Russia is closely monitoring the situation and working with foreign and defense ministries. Bushehr site, Iran's only nuclear plant that's operating, is a key part of Russia's nuclear cooperation with Iran. Russia is also building additional facilities there. Likashev warned that any attack on the site could lead to a disaster on the scale of Chernobyl. While Iran denies seeking nuclear weapons, Russia demands and stands by Tehran's right to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. This is happening as US President Donald Trump has urged Iran to renounce nuclear weapons or face worse consequences. All right, I request Matthew to join us back in the discussion here with his first comments.
Well, if Russia wants to evacuate its employees from Iran, that means Russia thinks that there's going to be trouble in Iran, possibly an American or Israeli attack. So the fact that Russia is pulling its people out means that they think the regime may fall, even though they don't want it to.
All right. Now, given the fact that Russia has long stood by Iran, has been its long-time partner, how do you see, if at all, any change in that relationship with Iran not stopping on its nuclear program?
If Iran's nuclear program is toppled, I don't see why Iran would need assistance from Russia anymore. If the Iranian regime is overthrown, then Iran is not going to be an ally. It's probably not going to be an ally of Russia anymore. It's going to be an ally of the United States, and who knows, maybe even of Israel if they finally come to their senses. So I think that Russia's future in Iran is looking very dim right now, and I think the Russians know this.
How do you see US watching these developments? Because of course the nuclear talks that were taking place last year did not fructify, and now Trump of course has issued a renewed threat to Iran and has in fact said loud and clear that the increased armada, as he said, moving towards Tehran is to have it to come to the negotiating table.
Right. The U.S. this is a show of force by the United States, and it's meant to show the regime in Tehran, it's meant to send a message saying we're watching you and we're considering taking military action against you with a view to overthrowing you. So the U.S. Navy vessels that are steaming towards Iran, if they're not there already, I don't think they're there yet, but they're on their way. That's an expression by the United States that it's not going to put up with the behavior of the mullahs for much longer.
All right, Matthew, thanks then very much for joining me in this conversation. And we move ahead now, viewers. Now, Turkish authorities have reportedly arrested 6 individuals, including an Iranian national, on charges of espionage for Iran. The arrests followed coordinated raids across 5 provinces that took place yesterday. The suspects were detained after a joint investigation conducted by Istanbul prosecutors, anti-terrorism police and Turkey's intelligence agency. The suspects are now accused of gathering intelligence on military bases and other sensitive locations in Turkey and abroad. They are further alleged to have partaken in reconnaissance near the NATO-run encircling air base in southeastern Turkey's Adana province. Additionally, there are also charges of getting involved in the shipment of drones through Turkey for use in third countries and sharing this information with Iranian intelligence. These arrests come amid growing tension as Iran faces widespread unrest and pressure from the US to negotiate a deal to curb its nuclear program. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is set to visit Turkey tomorrow for talks with his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan. The discussions will focus on recent developments in Iran, including tension with the US. We now move ahead to news from the United States, where President Donald Trump's border chief, Tom Homan, said that the administration will continue its immigration enforcement mission in Minneapolis following the killing of 2 protesters by federal agents there. Speaking at a news conference, Homan said that Trump wants the situation fixed and vowed the government would not abandon its efforts but would carry them out more carefully.
I was there. I walked through detainee facilities. I walked through the medical.
Homan acknowledged that improvements are needed in how operations are conducted and said any agents who violate standards of conduct will be held accountable. He stressed that enforcement actions would remain targeted and professional. Let's continue playing that statement.
Monday, to regain law and order in the city beloved by many, and work together to remove threats from the community. One thing we did agree on, though, everybody I talked to agreed on, was that community safety is paramount. One thing we all agreed on was U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement is a legitimate law enforcement agency that has a duty to enforce the laws enacted by Congress and keep this community safe. I do not want to hear that everything's been done here has been perfect. Nothing's ever perfect, and anything can be improved on. And what we've been working on is making this operation safer, more efficient, by the book. The mission is going to improve because of the changes we're making internally. No agency or organization is perfect. President Trump and I, along with others in the administration, have recognized that certain improvements could and should be made. That's exactly what I'm.
All right, request Matthew to join us back in the discussion here. Matthew, how do you see ICE operations changing now after the new guidelines that have come out and after Tom Homan's statements?
Well, this is definitely a retreat. It looks like a cave-in to me by President Trump. He is scaling back ICE operations in one of the worst asylum states in America, Minnesota is not officially an asylum state, but there is no actual legal definition for what that means. But it's a state that tolerates illegal aliens and refuses to cooperate with the federal government in handing them over in law enforcement. So this is definitely a retreat by the Trump administration, although they're characterizing it as, you know, just sort of a minor pullback. They have been affected by the criticism after the two American citizens were shot, even though the circumstances of both of those killings are not exactly clear right now, and both were part of an organized, you know, violent resistance against ICE. And you know, I wouldn't say they were good people. Maybe what happened to them they didn't deserve, but I wouldn't say they were good people. But anyway, the jury is out on that, so to speak. And you know, President Trump has been stung by the you know, members of his own party telling him that he's going too far, and he's responded to the pressure and he's backing off. And ICE is not withdrawing from Minnesota, but they're scaling back their operations there, and they're just going to, Tom Homan said they're just going to go after the worst of the worst violent criminals in Minnesota, instead of just, you know, having a more general operation going after targeting illegal aliens who aren't supposed to be in the United States. So this is you know, a retreat. Some could call it a strategic retreat. But President Trump, you know, blinked when confronting an organized, violent leftist resistance to immigration enforcement in the United States, and this is likely only going to encourage more resistance, even though he thinks he's tamping down resistance. That you know, that suddenly people are going to are going to support him, who don't support him. That's not going to happen. This is only going to encourage more attacks on federal law enforcement. So.
All right, Matthew, we'll leave it at that. Thanks for your comments here.
Okay.
And now moving ahead, viewers, Chinese Premier Li Qiang has called for a golden era between China and the United Kingdom during a meeting with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Beijing. The two leaders discussed the possibility of restarting stronger relations, with Premier Li expressing his appreciation for Starmer's efforts to strengthen China-UK ties. Starmer acknowledged China's growing influence and stressed the need to be more open and frank in dealing with differences. The visit is significant as it's the first by a British Prime Minister since 2018. Let's listen into some of the key statements.
This means being more open and frank to deal directly with differences, and it also means recognising and respecting modern China in all its vastness and complexity. But everything it's achieved, and as a power whose fortunes directly affect the United States.
很多人期待通过你这次访问，中英能够重启黄金时代。我赞赏首相先生对发展中英关系的重视和付出的努力。中英作为世界重要两极的和两大经济体，应当继续弘扬破冰精神，应当进一步拉紧合作的纽带。这不仅是我们两个国家应对风险、共促发展的理性选择，也是中英两国作为负责任的大国，携手推动解决全球问题的应有的担当。
And now moving ahead, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has expressed doubts about the US and Ukraine security guarantees. Speaking to reporters, Lavrov questioned the viability of these guarantees, saying he didn't know what exactly had been agreed upon. He further stated that if the goal was to maintain the current Ukrainian regime and use it as a platform to threaten Russia, such guarantees would not provide long-term peace. Lavrov also reminded about a draft of security guarantees proposed by Ukraine in April 2022, which Russia supported but claimed former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson had blocked the agreements. He said these guarantees would have ensured collective security in the region. Lavrov called for a focus on real proposals rather than public declarations that only escalate tension. Let's listen in.
Я, например, слышал, что, по крайней мере, Марко Рубио, вдруг его пригласили в Сенат, он сказал, что вопрос о гарантиях безопасности решен. Мы не знаем, о каких гарантиях они договаривались, но, судя по всему, о гарантиях тому самому режиму украинскому, который проводит русофобскую, неонацистскую политику. И если цель состоит в том, чтобы сохранить режим на какой-то части территории бывшей Украины и продолжать делать этот режим плацдармом для создания угроз против Российской Федерации, то, наверное, вы сами сообразите, что такие гарантии безопасности едва ли могут обеспечить надежду.
And now moving ahead, EasyJet has held discussions with Elon Musk's Starlink about introducing onboard Wi-Fi, but says the economics do not currently make sense for the low-cost airline. CEO Kenton Harvest said talks were ongoing, describing Starlink's product as high quality with fast streaming speeds, but too costly at present. The comments follow a public dispute between Musk and Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary, who warned that Wi-Fi Atene could increase fuel costs by up to $200 million annually, and said most budget passengers would not pay for the service. Harvest said EasyJet is also in talks with other connectivity providers and is monitoring a rapidly evolving market. The airline plans to keep its options open and will adopt a service only when pricing and value align with its low-cost model. And that's all we have time for. Viewers, keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.